in the hope that somebody will come along and say, there's money in this, let's support Meghan and her As Ever brand. I thought she behaved so badly, and Harry too.
Something is happening right now that the mainstream media is barely touching. And the longer it goes unaddressed, the louder the silence becomes. We are talking about Prince Harry, a man who once stood in front of the entire world and said he was choosing freedom, choosing peace, choosing his family over the crown. And for a moment, just a brief, shining moment, a lot of people believed him. But today, Tom Bower, one of the most feared investigative biographers in Britain, a man who has spent decades pulling apart the carefully constructed narratives of the world's most powerful people, has turned his full attention to something that nobody in Montecito once discussed. A photo, a moment, a detail surrounding little Lilibet, Prince Harry's own daughter, that is raising questions so serious, so layered, so deeply uncomfortable, that people in royal circles are reportedly not sleeping easy. And Harry? According to multiple sources close to the situation, he is not holding it together. Stay with me, because what I'm about to walk you through is not tabloid gossip. This is a pattern, a timeline, a series of decisions that, when you lay them side by side, stop looking like coincidence and start looking like something far more deliberate. Setting the scene, who is Tom Bower and why does he matter? Before we get into the details of what's being said about Lilibet's photo, you need to understand who Tom Bower is, because that context matters enormously. Tom Bower is not a blogger. He is not a YouTube commentator with an opinion and a ring light. He is a journalist and biographer with decades of experience investigating some of the most powerful institutions in the world. He has written books on Rupert Murdoch, Robert Maxwell, Richard Branson, Tony Blair. These are not fluff pieces. They are deep, sourced, relentless investigations that have made serious people very uncomfortable. When Bower turns his attention to someone, it is not because he wants drama. It is because he has noticed something. A thread, an inconsistency, a place where the public version of events and the documented version of events don't quite line up. And when he began focusing on Harry and Meghan, the reaction from their team was not calm dismissal. It was not a relaxed, "He's wrong, here are the facts." The reaction was legal. It was aggressive. It was urgent. Now ask yourself, and I genuinely want you to sit with this question. Why does a carefully managed, professionally staffed PR operation respond to a biographer with lawyers instead of with facts? That question alone tells you something. Archie's birth, where the timeline first breaks down. To understand what's happening with Lilibet, you have to go back to Archie. Because Archie's birth is where the pattern first becomes visible. And it's a pattern that too many people dismissed too quickly. Here is what was announced publicly. Meghan went into labor during the afternoon. The palace put out a statement. The world waited. And then, hours later, the announcement came that Archie Harrison Mountbatten Windsor had been born. Routine. Normal. Except it wasn't. Because when the actual timeline was pieced together, Archie had not been born in the afternoon hours. He had been born early that morning. We are talking about an 8-hour gap between when the public was told labor began and when Archie had actually already entered the world. 8 hours. Now, I want to be precise here, because precision matters. There are explanations for why public announcements don't always sync perfectly with private timelines. Families want a moment to themselves. The palace machinery moves slowly. These things happen. But here is where it gets more complicated. Royal births are not just family moments. They are legal events. They are documented moments tied directly to the line of succession. There are official physicians. There are sign-offs. There are records. Not because the monarchy is paranoid, but because history has demanded it. The body rule, the requirement that a child be physically born of the mother, is not just a quaint tradition. It is a legal standard embedded in royal protocol, specifically to ensure the integrity of succession. And when Bauer and others began asking about the documentation surrounding Archie's birth, the kind of transparent official confirmation that has accompanied virtually every royal birth in modern history, those questions were met with walls, not answers. Walls. That is what started this. The Lilibet photo. What Tom Bauer is now saying. Which brings us to Lilibet. And this is where things get genuinely troubling, not because of wild speculation, but because of the specific nature of what's being scrutinized. Lilibet Diana Mountbatten Windsor was born in June 2021 in Santa Barbara, California. She was named after the Queen's childhood nickname, a choice that, depending on who you believe, was either a deeply touching tribute or a calculated emotional maneuver designed to make the royal family feel too emotionally entangled to push back publicly. But here is what Bauer and other investigators are now pressing on. The photographic record surrounding Lilibet is extraordinarily thin, extraordinarily controlled. And when photos have been released, they have been carefully composed in ways that raise eyebrows among people who look at these things professionally. Think about that for a moment. We live in 2024. We live in an era where celebrities post daily stories of their children's breakfast, where royal children are photographed at school gates, at Trooping the Color, at Christmas walks in Norfolk. George, Charlotte, and Louis are photographed enough that the public genuinely feels like it watches them grow up in real time. Lilibet? The photos are rare, the angles are specific. The moments feel curated in a way that goes far beyond reasonable privacy protection. And when Bauer began pointing this out, when he began asking the pointed, specific question of why a couple who built their entire post-royal brand on authenticity and openness would control images of their daughter this tightly, Harry reportedly fell apart. Sources close to the situation describe him as devastated. Emotional in a way that goes beyond simple frustration at press intrusion, torn apart, and not in the way of someone who is simply tired of being followed by cameras. In the way of someone who feels like a truth they've been carrying is getting closer and closer to the surface. And here's the question I want to leave with you. Why would a photo, just a photo, have that effect on someone? The pattern of control. Let's step back and look at the larger picture here, because this is not just about one birth announcement or one set of photos. This is about a pattern of information control that runs through virtually every significant moment in Harry and Meghan's public life since 2018. When they stepped back from royal duties in January 2020, the so-called Megxit, the announcement itself was made unilaterally, without proper consultation with the palace. It bypassed every established protocol. That alone was extraordinary. Royal transitions of that magnitude are negotiated, structured, managed through institutional channels. This one was dropped like a press release. When Harry gave his interview with Oprah alongside Meghan in March 2021, the claims made about racism, about mental health, about institutional cruelty were serious and sweeping. But they were also unchallengeable in the moment. One side spoke. The other was bound by centuries of tradition that prevents the monarchy from engaging in public point-by-point rebuttals. It was, strategically speaking, a masterclass in controlling a narrative. When the Netflix documentary aired, it was edited and structured in a way that presented one version of events as definitive truth. And when royal commentators and even some journalists pushed back on specific claims and timelines, the response was not engagement, it was dismissal. When the book Spare came out, the same dynamic played out. Harry's account was presented as raw, honest, unfiltered. But historians, royal biographers, and even family members quietly, and sometimes not so quietly, disputed specific details. Do you see the pattern yet? Every major public moment has been carefully constructed to deliver maximum emotional impact while minimizing the possibility of fact-checking in real time. And when anyone, journalist, biographer, royal commentator, tries to fact-check after the fact, the response is legal pressure. That is not the behavior of people with nothing to hide. That is the behavior of people who understand exactly how information works and who are deploying that understanding with precision. The financial reality. Why control has become survival. Now let's talk about money, because money is at the root of so much of this. And understanding the financial pressure Harry and Meghan are under right now helps explain why the control over their image and narrative has become so intense. When they left the royal family, the initial financial picture looked extraordinary. A Netflix deal reportedly worth $100 million. A Spotify podcast deal reportedly worth $20 million. The book Spare, which sold millions of copies globally. Speaking engagements that command hundreds of thousands of dollars per appearance. A brand valuation that, on paper, made them look like one of the most commercially powerful couples on the planet. But here's the reality check that people are slowly waking up to. Not all of that held. Spotify dropped them. And not quietly. The executive who used the word grifters publicly, that was not a small moment. That was a multi-million-dollar media company publicly signaling that the relationship had not delivered what was expected. That the value proposition, when tested in the real world of actual audience engagement and content performance, did not match the initial hype. The Netflix deal still exists, but Netflix is a business. They need content that performs. They need audiences. And the content Harry and Meghan have produced, while generating headlines, has not always generated the subscriber numbers and viewing hours that Netflix ultimately cares about. There is pressure, real pressure, quiet pressure, but pressure. The speaking engagements have had mixed results. In Australia, the reception was notably cooler than anticipated. In several markets, ticket sales and audience enthusiasm have not reflected the star power that was supposedly being sold. And when the people paying six-figure sums for keynote appearances start whispering about ROI, the phone calls get shorter and the offers start to change. And all of this is happening while they maintain a lifestyle in Montecito, California, that by any reasonable estimate costs millions of dollars annually. The property, the security, which is not cheap and which has been a source of significant controversy regarding who pays for it. The staff, the travel, the infrastructure of being a global brand. The math is getting complicated. And when the math gets complicated, the need to protect the brand becomes more intense, which means the control gets tighter, which means the walls get higher, which means the public curiosity gets sharper. It is a cycle, and right now they are caught deep inside it. Harry's inner circle and what it has cost him. There is something genuinely sad at the center of all this, and I want to acknowledge that, because it's easy to get lost in the analysis and forget that there are real human beings in the middle of it. Harry grew up with something that very few people in the world have. A network of people who knew him before the title, before the cameras, before the weight of expectation. His military friends, his Eton connections, people who would look him in the eye and tell him the truth regardless of whether it was comfortable. People who had seen him at his worst and his best and who were loyal to the person, not the prince. That circle is largely gone now. The people around Harry today are, by most accounts, predominantly professionals, PR strategists, communications advisors, media lawyers, brand consultants, Netflix executives, celebrity acquaintances whose relationships are built in the ecosystem of mutual professional benefit. And that matters profoundly, because those relationships cannot serve the same function as genuine friendship. A PR strategist cannot tell you that you're making a mistake, because their job depends on executing your decisions, not questioning them. A media lawyer cannot tell you that legal pressure is making you look guilty, because their professional instinct is always toward legal action. A celebrity acquaintance cannot hold you accountable because you are both performing for the same audience. When you lose the people who will speak uncomfortable truth to you, you end up in a bubble. And bubbles are dangerous, not because they feel bad, but because they feel good. They feel like support. They feel like validation. But they are not. They are an echo chamber wrapped in expensive clothing. And reportedly, Harry is feeling it. Sources describe him as constantly online, obsessively checking what is being written about him, reading the commentary, the criticism, the theories, not able to look away, not able to disconnect, which is the sharpest possible irony. A man who said he left the royal life because of media pressure, now living inside a media pressure cooker of a completely different kind, with no one around him who can pull him back to ground. The royal family's calculated silence. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, the royal family is doing something that deserves its own analysis. Absolutely nothing public. King Charles has not commented. Prince William has not commented. The palace has not issued statements. No royal spokesperson has engaged with any of the questions being raised by Bauer or anyone else. The silence is total, and this is the important part, it is deliberate. This is not the silence of an institution that has been caught off guard. This is the silence of an institution that has made a strategic calculation. And that calculation goes something like this. Any response, any engagement, any even oblique acknowledgement of the questions being raised gives those questions oxygen. It validates them. It makes them the story in a way that silence does not. So the strategy is distance. Measured, deliberate, carefully maintained distance. King Charles, who has been ill, who has been managing his own public image carefully during his cancer treatment, is not going to wade into questions about his grandchildren's documentation. Prince William, who is quietly becoming more popular and more respected with every passing month as he grows into the role of future king, is absolutely not going to touch this with a 10-foot pole. And so the monarchy watches. It allows Harry and Meghan to remain technically within the fold. They have not been stripped of titles. They have not been formally expelled, while also making clear through every possible signal that the connection is nominal, that the distance is real, that the door, while technically open, leads only to a room where very uncomfortable conversations would have to happen. And King Charles reportedly sees his grandchildren, Archie and Lilibet, rarely. The relationship is managed, limited, structured in ways that keep everyone at arm's length. For a man who, whatever his flaws, is genuinely someone's grandfather, that has to cut deep. What Archie and Lilibet don't know yet. I want to spend a moment on the children, because in all of this analysis and investigation and narrative warfare, two small children are simply growing up, and the conditions of that childhood are deeply unusual. Archie and Lilibet are growing up far from the extended family that would normally be part of their lives. No regular interaction with their Windsor cousins, George, Charlotte, Louis, who are roughly similar in age. No summers at Balmoral. No Christmas mornings at Sandringham in the broader family gathering. No easy, casual, unscripted family moments of the kind that shape a child's sense of belonging to something larger than themselves. Their parents have made choices, some for understandable reasons, some that are harder to justify, that have curated their childhood into something extremely controlled. There is a small world that Harry and Meghan have built in Montecito, and within that world, by all appearances, the children are loved. But love is not the only thing children need. They need roots, they need context, they need the messy, complicated, sometimes painful experience of a family that is larger than their own house. And what happens when Archie and Lilibet grow up enough to start asking questions themselves? What happens when a curious teenager Googles their own name and finds years of documented controversy, legal battles, and unanswered questions? What happens when they want to meet their grandfather, their uncle, their cousins, and find that decades of calculated distance have made those relationships stranger than they needed to be? These are not hypothetical concerns. These are the very human consequences of choices being made right now by adults who believe they are protecting their children while, perhaps, also protecting themselves. Why silence is no longer a strategy that works. There is something important happening in the current media landscape that I want to name clearly, because it directly affects everything we have been discussing. Silence used to work. 10 years ago, 15 years ago, if you were a powerful person facing uncomfortable questions, you could simply choose not to engage. You could let the news cycle move on. You could wait for the next big story to push yours off the front page. Silence was a legitimate and often effective communications strategy. That world no longer exists. Today, silence does not quiet a story, it amplifies it. Every unanswered question becomes a search term. Every unexplained gap becomes a Reddit thread, a YouTube video, a podcast episode, a TikTok that gets 17 million views. The audience doesn't move on, it moves deeper. And the tools available to investigators, to journalists, to ordinary curious people have never been more powerful. Tom Bauer is not working alone. He has access to records, to sources, to documentation. But so do thousands of other people who are now focused on the same questions. And unlike a single biography that takes years to write, these investigations are happening in real time, constantly updated, constantly cross-referenced. Harry and Meghan's communications team is not fighting one front. They are fighting thousands of fronts simultaneously, and every legal letter they send in response to a question doesn't close the question, it broadcasts it. They sent lawyers is itself a story. It is itself a signal that something is worth knowing. So the current strategy: respond to scrutiny with legal action, maintain control of images, avoid direct answers, deploy emotional narratives when the pressure gets too high, is not just failing, it is actively making the situation worse. The trust question: what it all comes down to. Let's strip everything away. Forget the palace intrigue for a moment. Forget the money, the PR battles, the legal maneuvers. Let's get to the core. The reason this story matters, the reason it keeps growing instead of going away, is because it is fundamentally about trust. And trust, once it starts to erode, has a momentum of its own. When Harry and Meghan left the royal family, they asked the world to trust their account, to believe that they had been mistreated, to believe that they were acting out of genuine anguish and not calculation. A very large number of people extended that trust generously and completely. But trust requires consistency. It requires transparency. It requires that the story you tell publicly lines up, at least mostly, at least roughly, with the story that facts on the ground are telling. And when an 8-hour discrepancy appears in a birth announcement, trust wobbles. When photo releases are so controlled that people start asking not just why so private, but what exactly are you protecting? Trust wobbles. When a major media partner publicly calls you grifters on the way out the door, trust wobbles. When legal letters replace explanations, trust wobbles. None of these things individually proves anything specific, but collectively they create a picture that the public, which is not stupid, which does not need to be told what to think, is now reading with very different eyes than it had 2 years ago. And the hardest part? The people who supported Harry and Meghan most fervently, most loyally, those supporters are now among the most confused, because they believed the story. They invested in it emotionally, and now they are watching details accumulate that don't fit the narrative they were sold. And that disillusionment, when it comes for true believers, is not quiet, it is not gentle, it is the loudest thing in the room. What needs to happen now? I am not in the business of telling public figures how to run their lives. But if I were sitting across from Harry, not Prince Harry, just Harry the person, and I had one honest conversation available to me, here is what I would say. The walls are not working. Every wall you build becomes a headline. Every lawyer you deploy becomes evidence in the court of public opinion that there is something behind the wall worth knowing. Every carefully curated photo of your daughter, every image that shows just enough to prove she exists, but not enough to feel real, is feeding the exact speculation you are trying to suppress. The people you have lost, your old friends, the ones who knew you before Meghan, before the titles, before all of this, those people could have told you this years ago. Not because they are smarter than your current team, but because they had nothing to lose by being honest. Your current team has everything to lose. One real moment. One unscripted, unmanaged, unexploited moment. Harry with his daughter at a birthday party. Meghan at a school gate. Both of them somewhere ordinary doing something ordinary. Would do more to reset public perception than 100 Netflix documentaries. It would not answer every question, but it would change the energy. It would remind people that behind the brand, there are human beings. And that reminder matters enormously. But it would require giving up control. And right now, control is the thing they are least willing to let go of. Where this is going, the reckoning ahead. So where does this all end? What does the next chapter look like? Based on everything we know, the financial pressure, the investigative momentum, the shifting public opinion, the royal family's continued calculated distance, here is what seems likely. The questions around Archie and Lilibet's documentation will not go away. They will intensify. Tom Bauer is not the only person investigating. He is simply the most prominent. And the trail that journalists and investigators are following does not dead end on its own. It requires active transparency to close. The financial model Harry and Meghan have built is under real strain. The easy money, the shock of royals go rogue, has been spent. The residual value of their royal connection is depreciating every year. To sustain the Montecito lifestyle and the global brand they have constructed, they need either genuinely compelling content or some kind of dramatic new narrative reset. The former is genuinely hard. The latter is risky and increasingly hard to engineer. The royal family will continue to say nothing publicly and do everything strategically. King Charles is not going to pick up the phone and call Harry for a televised reconciliation moment. William is not going to write an open letter forgiving his brother. The institution will protect itself. That is what institutions do. And Harry, quietly, away from the cameras, in the Montecito compound that was supposed to represent freedom, is reportedly struggling with the weight of all of it. The distance from family, the exposure of his children to scrutiny he cannot control, no matter how hard he tries. The realization, settling in slowly and painfully, that the escape he planned so carefully has not delivered the peace he was promised. That is not a political point. That is a human one, and it deserves to be named. The final question. Here is where I leave you today, and I want you to genuinely think about this, because it is the question underneath every question we have discussed. If everything surrounding Harry and Meghan's story is exactly what they say it is, a love story, a fight for freedom, a brave choice to step away from a toxic institution, then why is the answer to every serious question a legal letter instead of a clear, simple, human explanation? Why are the children of two of the most media-savvy, communications expert-surrounded people on the planet the least photographed, least humanized, least seen royal children in modern history? Why does a photo of a little girl named Lilibet, a photo, reportedly reduce her father to tears not from pride or love or nostalgia, but from the fear of what it might reveal? The story is not over. It is not even close to over. And the next chapter, whatever it turns out to be, is going to require someone in that household to make a choice that they have so far refused to make. The choice between control and truth, because you genuinely cannot have both. Not forever, not in this world, with these tools, in this moment. And time, which has never been a friend to hidden things, is running out. If this raised questions you hadn't considered before, share it, because this conversation is only getting started. And subscribe, because what comes next in this story is going to be something none of us are ready for.